Torsos of Desire, written by me, Nicole Beckley. Goals: 1. Be great at job. 2. Forget about what's his name. 3. Find newer, better, faster / slower lover. 4. Apartment. Have one. 5/1. Get job. A new job. After I got let go from my temporary job at a temp agency, I decided to change my life completely and become a journalist. I had a lot of questions like who, what, when, and some other ones. I figured these questions needed answers. By a stroke of pure luck, I bumped into my father's college roommate, John, at one of his regular hangouts, in his office at the Ludlow Media Building. I was there for a job interview. John said they weren't hiring journalists, but did I have any other skills? Do you have any cherries? I asked, and immediately tied a cherry stem into a knot with my tongue. John was impressed. You're creative. Why don't you go down to the design department? They'll find something for you. I was hired, and for my skills, not just my good looks like everyone always assumes. It's like you can't even be 5'9" and blonde with a tiny waist anymore without everyone assuming the worst. Jeez. I was so excited, I decided to treat all of the Ludlow reception staff to celebratory champagne at the restaurant next door. I could go down to the design department later. They wouldn't even know I was gone. It's like they say, always leave them wanting more. A while later, I got a call. Why wasn't I in the design department? I hiccuped. Probably because I was already back home now. After all, it was 2:30 p.m., almost quitting time. Besides, ever since Jonathan had moved out because I wasn't taking our relationship seriously enough, I was paying twice as much rent. I needed to spend a lot of time in the apartment to make it worth it. I also either needed to make some cash or move. And you don't move in New York City unless you receive a second warning that you're living in a condemned building and bulldozing is going to start tomorrow, like happened with my last place. And who did Jonathan think he was, anyway? I could take relationships seriously. Very seriously. In fact, I was going to take all of my relationships seriously from now on, just as seriously as I was taking this new job. I told them I'd be there at the crack of dawn to start working, and they said, I think it's the crack of dawn, not down, and I said, whatever, and they said, be there at 8:30. I know, 8:30 a.m. Talk about the crack of dawn. First day of work. I was so excited for the first day. I laid out my clothes the night before. I could tell that everyone on the subway was looking at me like, who's the bigwig with the new job? Even if what they said was, hey, no eating on the train, or move it, lady. They recognized I was a lady. I arrived wearing my best steel-toed lavender pumps and a sheer, shimmery white dress that you could almost see through, but not quite. You have to leave some things to the imagination. That's what I learned from my semester abroad at that French nudist colony. I don't want to oversell the outfit, but if I walked by and you thought, goddess, you wouldn't be wrong. Inside the design department, everybody was already busy. People in glasses were clacking on their keyboards or talking on their phones or using markers to write on whiteboards, not just to sniff. This was a real workplace. All the desks were lined up in orderly rows, and at the biggest desk in the furthest back row was a design department supervisor, Sherry Peterman. She had a big curly mass of white hair that reminded me of the hair of a nun who taught one of my middle school classes. When I was disruptive, she'd slap me with a wooden meter stick. God, I hate the metric system. I'm here reporting for duty, I said. She looked me up and down, probably noting how awesome my outfit was, and then told me that I'd been assigned to work in book jacket design. It's interesting that books need jackets. I guess most books are just chests and torsos. I was to be the assistant to Carrie Carrollton, or Coral Carlton, or Coral Carrington, or something. I wasn't really paying attention. Sherry pointed to the desk I was supposed to sit at. Finally, my own desk. Wow, I'd really made it. At the temp agency, you never really knew what you were going to get. Sometimes you got to sit at a desk. Sometimes you had to groom a dog. It was always a surprise. Just as I sat down, a lady rapped her knuckles on the desk and introduced herself as Carrie. She was a petite woman with big blue eyes and thin lips that made her mouth look like a straight line. I tried to suck my lips in to match hers, but it just felt too weird. I'm going to need a coffee immediately, she said. Tell me about it, I said, and I leaned back in my chair until I realized she was pointing at the door and wanted me to fetch her a coffee from the kitchen. My first assignment! Carrie told me that there were a bunch of projects coming up and she was going to need me to work around the clock, and I told her that was fine because right now my work was going to be my life. And was she going to eat that donut? She wasn't, so I ate it, and it was delicious. Second day of work. Now that I was a high-powered business lady with her own desk, I really felt alive. The sun was shining brighter, roses smelled rosier, and I hadn't stepped in any gum on the street. I was excited to have a place to go a few days a week. Or so I thought until Carrie called me and told me that work happens every day. Every day? Seems ridiculous. Carrie said she wasn't exactly happy to have a new assistant dropped into her lap and that she expected me to be a professional. She was kind of rude about it. But I told her I was up to any professional activity, except for wrestling. That's all fake anyway. Carrie told me that we were going to be doing design work for the new C.J. Carlson books. Apparently C.J. was the company's biggest author, even though her real identity was a secret. She never gave interviews and nobody knew who she was, not even her biggest rival, Jackie Langmore. Jackie worked for a different publisher and the authors were in an ongoing feud. If there was one thing I knew about, it was feuds. Just ask my ex-neighbor, Brienne. And if you see her, tell her I want all my extension cords back. Carrie said this project had to be successful, or else. Or else what? I asked. But Carrie just kept talking about how this was important if we wanted to have jobs in the future and that the whole publishing enterprise was at stake. She started explaining C.J. Carlson's new series of Buck Wild romance novels. She said the series stars a character named Buck Wild, which I found very unbelievable. Seriously, who names their child Buck? I mean, what's that short for? Buckminster? Carrie said it didn't matter, but that my main task was to order a bunch of supplies from the internet. Finally, something I was good at. I'd ordered many things from the internet over the years. High heels, low heels, kitten heels, clogs, mules, rain boots, open-toe strappy sandals, thigh-high lace-up boots. I was a preferred customer at Zappos.com. Carrie handed me a laptop and a long list of items to order. She said that we'd need them to do some photo shoots for the cover artwork and that screw-ups would not be tolerated. I guess somebody in the past must have really done some screw-ups. Judging from the list, some of the books must have a cowboy theme because a lot of the items were things like lassos and saddles and leather chaps. It made me think of Jonathan. We'd almost gone to a rodeo once, but then it turned out he was allergic to cows. Also, I was still mad at him. I was going to punish him by not forwarding any of his mail, not even the catalogs from the popcorn factory. Also, I was going to find someone new to fall in love with. From now on, I'd focus all of my efforts on finding love and taking my relationship seriously. I'd show Jonathan, even if I had to get serious with 5 guys at once. Slick, operator. You know how sometimes you see someone from afar and it's like a bolt of lightning strikes? Mostly because it's a terrible rainstorm with lots of lightning. That's how it was when I saw Fernando. Fernando Ayala de la Vega Lopez Perez, if you want his whole name, for medical records or something. He was all brawny and tall with long, dark hair that would have been flowing if it hadn't been sopping wet. He didn't have an umbrella. What a rebel. It was very sexy. I knew I had to talk to him, but how? He was walking quickly to the subway station, so I launched into a full sprint toward the same station entrance. With all the rain, it was pretty slippery, and I was wearing my sliding heels. I tumbled down the stairs just after he descended, and I let out a loud yelp, like, "Aye!" to get his attention. I was about to land on a subway musician playing a violin who was reaching out to catch me, but I struck my arm out and pushed against the violinist to fall the other way, directly onto Fernando. It worked. "Cuidado, gringa," he said, as he caught me in his muscular arms. He was a little slippery from all the rain, but hey, nobody's perfect. "Thank you," I said. I guess I lost control for a minute. I scanned his body and his name badge, committing it to memory. Then I caught his dazzling dark brown eyes, and I stared into them for what seemed like forever, but was probably just a few seconds, until he must have felt it too. He said, "Oye, mujer, llego tarde." I love a man with an accent. He couldn't take the force of our obvious attraction, so he pushed me out of the way, ran into the nearest open subway car, and jumped in. Not the first time I've made someone jump into the nearest form of transportation. If I had $1 for every man who just couldn't take the intensity of our connection, I'd have some amount of dollars. I really haven't been counting. The mailroom. After things didn't work out with Fernando, I was feeling really down. I tried to do all the things that usually cheered me up. I did a headstand at yoga class longer than anyone else. I pet a baby kitten. I called my friend Karen from a burner phone and pretended to be a guy she had a crush on in high school, Richard, who was just now getting up the nerve to confess his feelings for her. Nothing helped. Was it possible that I missed Jonathan? That was his name, right? About 6 feet tall, hair, maybe a beard, worked with fair trading or day trading or something. I guess I missed him more than I realized. Luckily, I was able to take my mind off things for a little while by going down to the mailroom in the Ludlow Media Building and picking up all of the packages I'd ordered from the internet. I had to get some help from Larry, the main mailroom guy, a big burly fellow with a bald head and tiny gray sideburns. I guess he just wanted to have some hair, so if he ever got into a conversation about who his hairstylist was, he'd have something to say. Mine's Tracy Jackals, and she is amazing, but totally booked, so don't even try to get an appointment. Larry loaded all of the packages into one of those big canvas-sided wheeled carts and asked where to. "Third floor, please," I said, and jumped into the cart too, because I wasn't going to turn down a free ride. I couldn't wait to tear open all these packages and see all the goodies and build a box for it, but Carrie said we had to keep everything in storage until the photo shoots next week. Next week? That's like telling a kid they can't open their Christmas presents till Christmas. But fine, I was going to show Carrie that I could wait patiently. And more importantly, that I was somebody who wouldn't do screw-ups. She really kept talking about that. I stacked all the boxes in the storage closet and then hung out there for a few more hours, calling Karen in intermittently and disguising my voice as Richard and saying we belonged together and I was planning to propose. But I just kept getting her voicemail. In between calls, I browsed the books in the storage closet to assess the author photos. You can tell a lot from somebody's author photo, mostly if they believe in hiring a professional photographer or not. There was Val and Sarah, who wore a big scarf and glasses to appear serious, Rafe Quinton, who had a handlebar mustache to seem quirky, and Angie Pix, who had her eyes closed and sun on her face to appear ethereal. Who did these authors think they were? And also, who were they? Jackie Langmore's author photo took up the whole back cover. Now that's a way to really say something. Mostly, look at me. You had to respect that. C.J. Carlson's books didn't have any author photos. It's one thing to be anonymous, but don't you want people to know what you look like? The fortune teller. Once I started looking for them, there were signs everywhere. 4-leaf clovers, horseshoes, no U-turns. I knew it. I was about to get lucky. And it was about time. It had been a while. I was frustrated and I needed to know what was going to happen with my love life. I marched straight into the fortune teller shop that I passed every day on the way to work. Normally I just ignored it because it was probably a scam, but today I decided it could be real. Besides, what did I have to lose? It was Saturday evening and the little neon eyeball in the window had just come on, indicating they were open. I stepped inside and Ace of Bases, The Sign, was playing, which seemed a little on the nose. The shop was dark and full of spooky stuff like mirrors and framed newspaper clippings from when they'd won Time Out New York's Best Fortune Teller 2006. The shop seemed to be just a lobby area with some wooden chairs surrounded by a bunch of blue velvet curtains. Not much in the way of decor, if you ask me. Suddenly, the curtains parted, and a woman of indeterminate age, 45, 60, who can tell anymore, stepped out. She was wearing a black flowy dress with her hair tied in a purple scarf and a long amethyst pendant hung around her neck. "Delivery?" she said. Her voice cracked like the voice of an old smoker. "No, I'm here to get my fortune told," I said. "Oh, I'd ordered some Dr. Bronner's soap from Amazon Prime and it still hasn't arrived yet." She appeared pretty distressed by this, but I told her she seemed nice and clean, and she shooed me behind the blue curtains. We went into a narrow vestibule, which was kind of small, but at least the seats were comfy. I'm a sucker for a nice padded seat. She pulled out a thick board with a metal sheet on it and told me to place my hands on the metal and count to 30. "How about 15?" I said. "I'd like to get this done quickly." But she insisted on 30. Some people just won't bargain. Suddenly my hands felt hot and then cold and then room temperature and then hot again. It was a real roller coaster. The woman had her eyes closed until she opened them. That's when I noticed they were green. It's so rare to see green eyes. "What's the verdict?" I asked. "You recently went through something," she said. I'd gone through many things recently, mostly doorways. "Your biggest challenge is yet to come." Challenge? I thought she was going to tell me about my love life. I thought you were going to tell me about my love life, I said. She said that's what she was talking about. There's someone in your past who could play a big role in the future. I tried to think about who this might be. There's Becky Ann, my college roommate, Sarah Rollins, my other college roommate after Becky Ann transferred to an all-girls dorm, Tristan, Sarah's boyfriend, married Salvador, my other college roommate after Tristan left Sarah for me and Sarah went crazy and tried to burn our building down, Bryce, the guy I left Tristan for after I couldn't take all this Sarah-Tristan drama. The list was endless. That'll be $60 and I prefer cash, she said. How about a collect on delivery situation? I asked. For some reason, she preferred to collect up front. I thought about what she'd said. Someone from my past was going to influence my future. It seemed too specific not to be true, right? The tarot card reader. I figured fortune tellers were pretty much like doctors. I needed a second opinion. I also needed someone to take a look at this wart that was growing on my toe. It was looking weird. I went into the Tarot Card Lounge on Baxter at Canal Street. It was a theme bar and the theme was tarot cards, so I figured it was a good place to get a reading. You know, where the experts hang out. I noticed a guy with a mustache and a pipe. Then I noticed a guy with a mustache and a cigarette. Then I noticed a guy with a mustache and an e-cigarette. I bypassed all of them. I really hate smokers. Instead, I found myself sitting in an intimate leather-padded booth under a red lantern directly across from an old witchy-looking tarot card reader. Her fingers were all covered in jeweled rings, and her arms were all covered in jeweled bracelets. She had one gold canine tooth and bright blue eyes. I'm going to read 3 cards for you, she said. They represent your past, present, and future. She told me to cut the deck, and then she flipped over 3 cards with little intricate drawings on them. How does one get into being a tarot card artist? I guess you have to have a real knack for drawing chalices. This first card is called The Fool, she said. It was a picture of a little hobo-looking guy with a knapsack. This is your past. It represents the beginning and the end, one door closing, another door opening. Man, just like the doorways the fortune teller had been talking about. This next card is The Lovers. It was a picture of 2 naked figures with a mountain between them. Neither the figures nor the mountain looked anatomically correct. How would they ever procreate or make tiny mountain chains? Clearly not the tarot card artist's best work. What's the mountain mean? I asked, hoping she would say something about Mount Everest, because it's obviously the best mountain. Basically, it's complicated. Is there anyone you have a complicated love relationship with? I racked my brain, but I couldn't think of anyone. That's fine, she said, and held up the final card. This one is the Magician. It represents your future. It's your ability to use your mind, soul, body, and heart. What about my keen sense of smell? I asked. I suppose you could use that too, she said. I'd seen a lot of crime shows. Whenever they reach a dead end, they'd bring a dog to sniff things out. If only detectives had better senses of smell. The Hot Nuts Vendor. Now that I knew the future, I could get back to my goal of finding someone new to fall in love with. They always say that love finds you when you least expect it. I tried to think of all the least likely places to find love. First, I got Chinese takeout, but none of the guys at the restaurant seemed interested. I got a bowl of ice cream at the ice cream emporium, but all the people there were moms and kids. I got an eclair from the chefs in training at the West Side Patisserie School, but all the chefs were busy attending to their pastries. Then I got some hot nuts from one of those guys on the street that sells hot nuts, because after all that looking for love, I'd worked up an appetite. I rushed up to the hot nuts vendor. You're going to have to wait a minute, he said. Fine, but I wasn't happy about it. What was I supposed to do, go to another hot nuts vendor? He was all the way at the other end of the block. The hot nuts vendor sensed my agitation. Sometimes in life, you have to wait for the really good stuff, he said. Like love, I asked. Or hot nuts, he said. This guy was wise. He was one of those, what do you call them? Wise guys. Yeah, he was a real wise guy. Finally, he handed me the hot nuts. They were piping hot, so hot in fact that I jumped and yelped. The hot nuts flew into the air and scattered all over the ground. Suddenly, pigeons were flying in from every direction, trying to descend on all the renegade hot nuts. I threw my hands wildly around my head to make sure that no pigeons tried to land on me. In the commotion, I forgot that I was holding my iPhone, and it flew high into the air and then came crashing down, landing right in the middle of a pile of spilled hot nuts. The pigeons did not seem to care one bit. A real genius. Oh, despair. Oh, agony. Oh, the tattered ruins of a once pristine object. How would I ever pick up the pieces and move on? How would I get past the trauma of seeing my iPhone shatter right in front of me in the middle of the street in broad daylight? It was a travesty. I wrapped the battered, sticky iPhone in my orange Chanel scarf and cradled it in both my hands. I knew this was an emergency room type situation, so I rushed as quickly as I could to the nearest Apple store. I'm going to need you to operate, stat, I yelled. In addition to crime shows, I'd watched a lot of medical dramas. There was a family of Eastern European tourists looking at iPads, a group of high school-age kids rubbing their hands on MacBooks, and a bunch of Asian businessmen just generally milling around. Nobody looked up from what they were doing. I ran to the back of the store. "Ma'am, do you have an appointment?" A pale, bushy-haired guy with a bushy beard intercepted me. "An appointment for an emergency?" I said. I'd never been that good at planning. "We probably can't see you unless you already have an appointment." Outrage! Couldn't they see that I was in crisis? "He's barely hanging on," I said. "He won't respond to my touch." I gently pressed my finger on the cracked screen, but nothing happened. "I can handle this." A deep voice came from behind me and then around me and then in front of me. He had defined biceps stretching the sleeves of his blue shirt. His skin was tanned and his mane of jet black hair billowed around his perfect face. Somehow he didn't even look dorky wearing a name tag lanyard, something it's nearly impossible to do. I just stared at him for a minute. Something about him seemed familiar. Had we met before? Let me take a look at that. He took the scarf and phone and ushered me toward a chair so I could sit down. He introduced himself as Paul and told me he was a genius, which seemed like a pretty pretentious thing to tell a stranger. But who was I to argue? I needed my phone fixed. He told me to stay put while he went to work on my issue. With all the excitement, I must have passed out for a second because when he came back, he told me I'd momentarily been unconscious. "The good news is I was able to get your phone turned on and we're fixing your cracked screen," he said. "Yes, you are a genius." I yelled and threw up my hands and embraced him like a long-lost person who'd been lost a long time ago. Wow, what was this guy made of? Rocks? This was a guy who clearly had a gym membership. I didn't let him go right away, but hung on until one of the European tourists tapped him on the shoulder because they needed some help. Come on, don't they have Apple stores in Europe? This has been Section 1 of Torsos of Desire, read by me, the author, Nicole Beckley, and produced by Nicole Beckley. The music is from Blue Dot Sessions. Tune in to the next episode to find out what happens next.